Ready for a deep dive? Today, we're going to explore The Hidden Cost of Money, a book by Bunney.
Oh, interesting.
It goes way beyond the usual economic discussions, to uncover how deeply money affects us in our families,
Right.
our identities, even the planet.
That's a pretty wide scope.
It is.
Mhm.
So, what do you think about his premise that money acts as a kind of communication system,
hmm
revealing societal values?
Well, I think there's some truth to that. Money does reflect priorities, but this communication gets distorted.
Distorted. How so?
Well, think about things like inflation
Oh, of course.
or government intervention.
Ah, I see.
These things can have unintended consequences.
Makes sense. And Bunny really brings this to life with stories from his own life. Growing up in a financially strapped household,
Oh, wow.
he saw how his dad's constant chase for financial security really strained their relationship.
Those personal experiences make the economic theory more relatable. It's like, how do money woes shape our behaviors?
Exactly. And then there's this scary point he makes about our money's buying power shrinking over time.
Hidden pay cut.
Yeah, housing, education, basic necessities, everything keeps getting more expensive.
And our incomes just can't keep up.
It's like running on a treadmill but getting nowhere.
It is. Bunney attributes this to inflation, fueled by expanding the money supply.
So each dollar buys less, but wages don't rise to match those prices.
Right. And then he introduces this concept called financial repression.
Financial repression. That sounds kind of ominous.
It is. It's basically a policy of keeping interest rates artificially low, often below inflation.
So how did that work?
Well, it helps borrowers, like governments, they can get cheap loans,
I see.
but it really hurts savers, especially retirees relying on interest income.
Because their money is losing value.
Exactly. They're essentially losing wealth over time. It's like a stealth tax.
The 2022 UK pension crisis is a perfect example.
Oh, absolutely. Those funds almost went under because the returns on their investments were so low.
Due to suppressed interest rates.
Right, and it incentivizes risky behavior just to try to keep up with inflation.
This all ties into his point about financial insecurity warping our decision-making. We become short-sighted
Right, focusing on immediate needs over long-term planning.
because it feels like our money is constantly losing value.
Exactly, and this makes it harder to save, invest wisely, or even think about the collective good.
We're too busy trying to survive.
Unfortunately, that's often the case.
Now, Bunny is pretty skeptical about government intervention, especially things like subsidies and bailouts,
He believes they distort the natural flow of capital.
instead of rewarding genuine innovation,
Right. They end up propping up failing companies.
like Theranos, for example.
Exactly, all that hype. But the company was built on a lie. Easy access to capital masked their problems.
And what about Tesla's sky-high valuation?
Another case where it's debatable whether the market is accurately reflecting the company's true worth.
So easy money can create a distorted picture of success.
It can, and lead to what Bunney calls capital destruction,
Capital destruction,
when huge amounts of resources are wasted on ventures that ultimately fail.
like pouring money into a black hole.
In a way, yes, he points to massive losses from some of today's biggest companies.
Like Uber, Snapchat.
Airbnb, billions of dollars just gone.
It's astounding.
And it's not just companies. He looks at entire industries, too. Take farming subsidies, for instance.
Oh, right.
They lead to overproduction,
Environmental damage.
even health problems.
So we're actually worse off, despite throwing all this money at the problem.
That's the irony. And Bunney argues that this tendency towards intervention keeps growing.
Why is that?
He links it to the pursuit of endless economic growth.
Which incentivizes more government control.
Right. And this has implications for democracy.
Because as governments gain more power over money
They also gain more influence over the narrative.
and the ability to silence dissenting voices.
Potentially, yes.
Sure.
He uses examples like the war on drugs,
And the pandemic response.
suggesting both involved a significant erosion of liberties. He calls this the illusion of freedom.
A chilling thought. He also explores the environmental cost of our current economic system.
Our quest for endless growth leads to resource depletion. We consume and discard without much regard for the consequences.
And capital often ends up supporting unsustainable practices.
Right, and discouraging investment in renewable energy.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And then he introduces this concept of mass formation.
Mass formation, what's that?
It's a societal condition where loneliness, meaninglessness,
Anxiety, frustration.
all these things make people susceptible to totalitarian control.
Wow, so it's like a perfect storm for authoritarianism.
In a way, yes. And this is where Bunney starts exploring potential solutions.
Solutions. Tell me more.
He focuses on alternative monetary systems like Bitcoin
Bitcoin.
and the power of decentralization.
Okay, so does he see Bitcoin as like a silver bullet?
Not exactly. He
Okay.
acknowledges that transitioning to a new monetary system would be difficult.
Of course.
Bitcoin itself faces challenges, volatility being one of them, and the lack of clear regulation.
Right. But he still sees it as a viable option.
He does. He sees it as a fundamental shift in how we think about money and its role in society. His book really pushes us to re-examine our assumptions and explore new possibilities.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
Maybe we should try to summarize the key takeaways so far.
Sure, we could do that.
Do you think a 10-point summary would be helpful?
Absolutely. For us and for our listeners.
Right.
Okay, so 10 key insights from the hidden cost of money so far.
Okay.
Number one, money serves as a communication tool reflecting societal values,
Okay.
but it can get distorted by things like inflation and government intervention, leading to unintended consequences.
Makes sense.
Number two, financial pressures have a huge impact on our behavior.
And our relationships.
Right, they shape our choices and influence our sense of self. Number three, the erosion of purchasing power due to inflation results in a hidden pay cut for many.
Right. It makes it tougher to afford basic necessities.
Exactly. Number four, financial repression, suppressing interest rates below inflation,
Benefits debtors at the expense of creditors.
and incentivizes risky investments.
Got it.
Number five, financial insecurity can make us focus more on short-term needs over long-term planning.
Which can harm our ability to save and invest.
Right. Number six, government interventions like subsidies and bailouts can distort capital flows.
Leading to malinvestment.
And they often prop up failing companies rather than supporting real innovation. Number seven, technological advances can disrupt established industries
Leading to job displacement.
and creating challenges in a system that depends on constant growth.
Okay. What else?
Number eight, the pursuit of endless economic growth can encourage governments to overreach.
Potentially leading to an erosion of civil liberties.
Exactly. Number nine, our current monetary system, with its focus on consumerism, contributes to environmental degradation.
By encouraging resource depletion and unsustainable practices.
Right. And lastly, number 10, widespread social ills like loneliness and anxiety can create conditions ripe for mass formation.
Making it easier for totalitarian structures to gain control.
Precisely.
It's amazing how deeply intertwined money is with every aspect of our lives.
It really is.
It's not just about, dollars and cents.
It affects our personal lives, our society, and even the health of our planet.
That we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
I can't wait to dive deeper into Bunney's analysis and uncover more of his insights.
Absolutely. Let's continue our exploration in part two, where we'll delve into these fascinating aspects of the hidden cost of money and uncover what a future might look like if we challenge the existing financial paradigm. Picking up where we left off, how about we explore how chasing money impacts parenthood?
That's an interesting angle. I don't usually think of economics and child rearing going together. How does he make that connection?
Well, he argues that growing financial pressures change the dynamics of how we raise kids. Consider the rise of dual-income households.
Both parents working just to get by.
Right, and that has real consequences
For the kids.
for the kids' development. Bunney highlights studies that show how crucial parental bonding is.
Early experiences.
Exactly. They shape a child's emotional regulation, their social skills, even their cognitive abilities.
So financial stress leads to less time for the children, and that can have lasting effects.
He suggests that this declining purchasing power actually shifts influence away from parents and towards peers.
Because the kids are spending more time with their friends.
Exactly. Parents are working longer hours.
Makes sense. Kids will seek connection wherever they can find it.
And he links this to rising anxiety and depression among young people.
Really?
He argues that financial pressure adds to a sense of hopelessness, It makes it harder for them to navigate the world.
It's like this hidden epidemic, this emotional toll on families.
And it's not just the kids either. The constant pursuit of financial security can change how we see ourselves.
How so?
We become so focused on earning a living that we lose sight of our passions.
Our values.
What truly fulfills us, he uses this powerful phrase, the erosion of self.
It's like we're chipping away at our own identity in this chase for money.
And this erosion, he says, weakens our internal locus of control.
You mean that belief that we have power over our own lives?
Exactly. We become reactive instead of proactive, always struggling to keep up with a system that feels out of control.
It's like the harder we work for security, the less secure we actually feel.
It's a real paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Bunney's book really makes us confront these hard truths. It's not just about the money itself, it's about the quality of our lives.
Our overall well-being.
Right from there, he dives into the world of business and finance, looking at the dangers of malinvestment.
And this is where it gets really insightful. He talks about how easy access to capital can create this illusion of success.
Oh, absolutely, like with those UK pension funds almost collapsing.
Because they were making risky investments trying to get any return in that low interest rate environment.
Precisely. Or think about the dot-com bubble back in the 90s. Companies with basically no revenue had huge valuations,
Pure speculation.
driven by that fear of missing out, and when that bubble bursts, the fallout is disastrous.
Like the 2008 housing crisis.
Exactly. Subprime mortgages fueled by easy credit,
And government incentives.
leading to a global financial meltdown. It's scary how these things can have such widespread consequences.
They do. And Bunney sees this pattern of malinvestment as a symptom of focusing on short-term gain over long-term sustainability.
He calls it capital destruction.
Meaning,
Resources are poured into things that ultimately create no real value.
it's like setting money on fire and hoping some of it turns to gold.
He attributes this destructive cycle to several factors: government intervention, for one,
Warped incentives.
and a culture that rewards reckless risk-taking over careful planning.
But he doesn't just focus on the problems, right? He offers some alternative viewpoints.
He does. He challenges some of the conventional thinking about capitalism.
And government's role in it all.
He suggests that a truly free market one that's not hampered by too much intervention can actually self-correct.
And lead to more innovation.
So he's not anti-capitalist. He's anti what he calls crony capitalism,
Meaning,
where government and big business are too closely intertwined. He sees that as the real problem.
and then he looks at the role of technology in all of this.
Automation, AI, all those things that boost productivity.
But can also lead to job displacement.
It's a complicated issue with no easy answers. Technology brings opportunities.
But it also disrupts industries.
Leaving people behind, he points to the decline of manufacturing,
And the rise of the gig economy?
where workers often lack traditional security and benefits. He's not saying technology is bad.
But we need to understand the impact it has on society.
Adjust our systems and make sure the benefits are shared fairly.
Help those who are displaced by automation find new skills.
Exactly, a more humane approach prioritizing people.
Over profit.
And he ties this back to money, arguing that our current system fixated on endless growth often ignores the human cost.
Of progress.
It's important to remember that economic advancement shouldn't come at the cost of social justice.
Or human well-being.
And that brings us to another fascinating topic. He explores the rise of controlling structures, both personal and societal.
So this is where the book gets a little bit darker. He's saying that the same forces distorting our economic system are also fueling a sense of control and surveillance.
He uses a lot of examples of the expanding security state.
The growing influence of big tech companies.
It's not just governments and corporations, though. He talks about this phenomenon called mass formation.
Where people willingly give up their autonomy.
Their critical thinking skills,
In exchange for a sense of belonging.
often driven by fear and anxiety,
So it's like a trade-off between security and freedom.
and how easily those anxieties can be manipulated.
It's a pretty bleak picture.
But he does offer some solutions. He believes that we need to reclaim our individual sovereignty,
Empower ourselves through knowledge.
build a more decentralized and resilient society.
And how do we do that?
He thinks Bitcoin can play a role. It allows individuals to operate outside the traditional financial system.
It's not just about the money then.
It's about freedom and autonomy. That's what makes this book so interesting. It's not just about economics, it's a call to action.
To reclaim our agency in a world that's becoming increasingly controlled.
Exactly. He gives us a lot to think about.
He does. What are your thoughts on all of this? His analysis and proposed solutions?
Well, I find his insights both intriguing and challenging. He's obviously concerned about where we're headed as a society.
And he's offering some pretty radical ideas.
He is. Do you think this vision of a decentralized, Bitcoin-powered future is realistic?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. It's hard to predict how technology will evolve, but what's important is that we're having these conversations.
Thinking about alternative possibilities.
Questioning the systems that govern our lives.
Even if we don't agree with all of Bunney's solutions, his work really makes us think critically,
Explore different paths. It reminds us that we have choices.
that the future isn't set in stone.
We can accept the status quo, or we can try to shape a better future.
The hidden cost of money is a reminder that we can't just be passive observers.
We have to engage, question, and actively work towards a future that aligns with our values.
And that might be the most important takeaway from this deep dive.
Absolutely. Let's take a break here and continue our exploration in part 3, where we'll delve deeper into Bunney's proposed solutions.
And what a more decentralized future might actually look like. Welcome back to our deep dive into the hidden cost of money. We've seen how money impacts our lives in countless ways, shaping everything from how we raise our kids to global politics. Now, let's look at some alternatives Bunney presents and consider what a future might look like where we challenge the current financial system.
Bunney actually explores some historical monetary systems that try to tackle these inherent flaws we see in fiat currencies. He finds the gold standard particularly intriguing.
A lot of people look back at the gold standard with a kind of nostalgia, seeing it as a time of stability. But weren't there some big issues with it too?
There were. Bunney acknowledges that the gold standard had its downsides, especially its susceptibility to manipulation by governments and those central banks. He points to times when countries abandoned their gold commitments during economic crises, essentially breaking their promises.
So even gold, which has intrinsic value and has been a pretty reliable store of wealth throughout history, isn't a perfect solution.
Right. What Bunney emphasizes is that any system, even one based on a limited resource like gold, can be corrupted if the incentives aren't aligned.
So where does that leave us? Are there any real alternatives to our current fiat system with all its problems and risks?
And this is where Bunney's analysis of Bitcoin gets really interesting. He sees it as a totally different kind of money. It's built on decentralized, trustless technology, not the whims of governments and central banks.
Bitcoin has been around for a while, but we're not really seeing it used for everyday transactions. The volatility makes a lot of people nervous. Is it really a practical alternative?
Those are valid concerns. Bunney knows there are obstacles to widespread Bitcoin adoption. The price swings are definitely one, and the lack of clear regulations in a lot of countries is another. But he argues that Bitcoin's real strength isn't about being used for daily purchases. It's about providing a safeguard against things like inflation and censorship.
So more like digital gold than digital cash.
Exactly. He sees Bitcoin as a hedge against that loss of purchasing power that's built into fiat currencies.
So it could protect our savings from the constant devaluation of our money.
Precisely. And it's not just about personal wealth. Bunney suggests that the decentralized nature of Bitcoin could completely revolutionize how we think about government and power structures.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Imagine governments that can't just print more money whenever they want to fund their projects. They'd have to be much more responsible with their spending, accountable to their citizens, focused on actually creating value instead of just extracting it.
That's a pretty radical idea, but I can see how it could shift the balance of power.
Bunney believes the shift could lead to a more balanced and fair society, one where individuals have more control over their own lives. He sees Bitcoin as a tool that could make that happen, a way to reclaim our sovereignty and build a more resilient and sustainable future.
It's a hopeful vision, but is it realistic? Can Bitcoin really live up to all that?
That's something we'll have to see play out. Bunney isn't making promises, but he presents Bitcoin as a potential solution, a technology that could disrupt the status quo and help us build a more just and fair world. Whether it succeeds or not, the ideas behind it and the conversations it's starting are incredibly valuable. It makes us question our assumptions about money, power, and the whole economic system we live in.
He encourages us to see that we have choices, that the future isn't predetermined. We can just go along with the existing system, or we can work to create something better.
Exactly. That's maybe the most important message we can take away from the hidden cost of money. Bunney doesn't just give us information, he empowers us. He encourages us to think for ourselves, challenge the way things are, and explore different paths.
It's a call to action. It's an invitation to take control and create a future that reflects our values and what we hope for.
And whether you agree with everything Bunney says, his book really makes us realize that money isn't just a neutral tool. It's a force that shapes our lives, our societies, and how we see the world. He's asking us to be aware of those hidden costs, to look for different perspectives, and to never stop questioning the systems that govern us.
This deep dive into the hidden cost of money has been eye-opening. It's left me feeling more aware and wanting to learn even more about these important issues.
I hope you'll take some time to reflect on the ideas we've discussed. think about how money affects our world and what we can do to build a more just and sustainable future.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it sparked your curiosity and given you the tools to explore these vital questions.